A warm welcome to our listeners and of course also to Mr. Daniel Steinman. We are on Econo Chat Let's Talk Business with Mr. Daniel Steinman, and it is week 55. Last time we spoke about the budget, but of course today we will go into more detail in regards to the budget, but also looking at policies and just to have an idea, because we should say that some people might think that the budget is not as important. When we're talking about the budget, we're talking about the national budget, which will be the budget will be put down by the Minister of Finance on the 23rd of Feb 2023. So Mr. Daniel Steinman, there is a confusion, I should say, in regards to the budget. I'm going to put it out here that some people think that there is an unequal distribution when it comes to the budget, and some people feel that education should get the bigger chart or the bigger pie of the budget. Some people think that the defense ministry doesn't need anything because we are not at war, but I hope that you will break that down for us. But before we do that, you need to tell us, why is the national budget so important? You need to give us priorities in regards to the budget allocation.
Wow, Elsie, that is a mouthful.
Okay.
So as always, hello.
Hi.
It's
welcome.
Very nice to be here. Let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
And if I explain the basics, then I think the context behind the budget will become clearer. And the first question that you need to answer is this general question, this overarching question of what do we want to achieve with the budget?
Yeah.
And that immediately shows you that we're looking at policy. We're looking at what is it that we deem to be most important, because remember, the budget is about spending money.
Yeah.
The income side is very static. You can actually fairly accurately estimate the income side, very accurately 1 year in advance, and fairly accurately 2 and 3 years in advance. So unless you're going to fiddle with the taxes, which I doubt and which I don't see on the horizon, the income side is static. So we're looking at the expenditure side.
Yeah.
In other words, how are we going to spend that 77 billion Namibia dollar that we have allocated in the budget to achieve certain results?
Yeah.
Now, what you need to do is you have to, in your mind, you have to make a clear distinction between what is a government expense, in other words, what belongs in the budget, and what is a private sector expense or even a public-private partnership. These are all extra budgetary items, and grants and loans and money that we get from bilateral agreements. This is not part of the budget. What we are concerned with, remember, we get in, and let me quickly just rerun the figures so that the listeners can get an idea of
background.
What we're talking about. We're looking at a total expenditure of about 66 billion Namibia dollar. Of that, what will be available is in the region of 62 or 63 billion. I will not know that until after the tabling. But what you're talking about is anything of between 4 and 8 billion so-called deficit.
Okay.
And the way that the deficit is financed is not important for this discussion, other to say that the sources, we call it it's called the so-called capital market. Capital market is where you borrow funds, not to be paid next year or the end of the month, but to be paid over 20, 25, 30, even 40-year cycles. So it's really capital. It's long-term investments, and that is where the deficit is funded from. But it's also the potential source of funding for many more budgetary items that we haven't really touched upon yet. We've since 2016, we've been running up against a wall in the sense that we've been battling with the economy. And what happens then is you go into survival mode.
Yeah.
You know, and you just try and make every year's budget ends meet, and you forget where you're going in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years from now. And then you get something like the Harambee Prosperity Plan, which is very important, because whether we can afford it or not, we need to have a future view. And when we carry on with our discussion, this is what I want to look at when we try to answer that question, what is it that we want to achieve?
Okay. Well, Mr. Daniel Steinman said it all. So let's quickly go for a short break, and once we return, we will then answer that question for you.